All right, yes, as Jingo said, I am the webmaster at NKnet, but today I'm just going to talk more about my own experiences a little bit about trying to get involved in North Korean human rights, for lack of a better term, and how that went, and and then give you some ideas of sort of the bigger picture of things you can get involved with here, and then for people who might be watching this on YouTube later, things that maybe you can do around the world from wherever. Not all necessarily in that order. So when I first got involved, I guess it would have been sometime in, I think it would have been in 2005. I quickly found that, I was in the US at the time, I was living in the greater Washington, D.C. area, and I've quickly found that it was hard to get involved. I mean, there were groups, Link is awesome Link is the reason I got involved, or one of the main reasons. They were really awesome at getting me, motivated about doing stuff, but there wasn't as much, what I've found, now that I work at a North Korean human rights organization, I realize why maybe it was hard for, whether it was this particular group or any other group that I, interacted with, it was hard for them to, put me to work. And a lot of it's just because I didn't have, maybe the necessary skills that they needed at that moment. And when I did, they were happy to put me to work, and they did. But I wanted to do more, so that's what I want to talk about, some of the niche things that maybe you can do now, and also a lot of you guys are students, so if there may be one or two of you out there who are interested in doing this, not just while you're here living in Korea for a year abroad or something, but maybe this is something that you want to get involved with for several years, and if that's the case, I have some ideas for you guys too. So. All right. Well, yeah, I've sort of alluded to this, but let's talk about it directly. There are a lot of barriers to entry, I think, to getting involved, at least at a somewhat serious level. First of all, is just knowledge about North Korea and North Korean human rights. But I think that is quickly that's pretty much disappeared. Anybody who wants to now, there's plenty of information in English. It's just sitting down and reading the books. Watching the documentaries. Many of you have probably seen more than I have, but that's really not so much of an issue anymore. But for those of you who are first approaching this, first reading about stuff, and you want to get involved right away, some things we can put we can maybe if you come to events and stuff, that's awesome. But maybe if there's a document that I need you to edit or something, you don't necessarily have the background knowledge to edit it as well as somebody else who does know a lot about the topic. So that's one barrier to entry, is just simply knowledge about the topic, of course. Then another is like one thing that I've noticed. I mean, I lived here for a few years before I even heard of several of the groups that now I think are I really respect for what they're doing. And they were there, but I just didn't really know about them. So I think a lot of here in South Korea, a lot of the Korean groups maybe are almost invisible unless you really go looking. They're almost invisible to the foreign crowd when we first arrive. It's only as you sort of get deeper and deeper in that you start to meet them. So hopefully we can talk about that a little bit too, about who they are. Another barrier obviously is language. That's part of the reason breaking into working with the South Korean groups is a big issue. Not only that we don't know Korean, but they sometimes the staff members at the NGOs, they feel awkward because they expect that, I should be able to talk to them in English. So they maybe are shy sometimes. I'm sure you've encountered this in Korean society, but so it goes both ways with the language, but that is an issue. Then of course there are cultural issues, cultural differences. From my perspective, I don't know if it's the same for all of you, but from my perspective, everything here seems very last minute. So I have an expectation. And I'm not actually, back in the States, I'm not a very organized guy, but when I'm here, sometimes I feel like I'm the one who's planning way, way in advance, when, back in the States it was the opposite. But nonetheless, I see a few heads nodding, so there are a lot of cultural differences, that's just one, but, it translates into, North Korean human rights NGOs or any organization here, relative to what I would expect coming from, where I'm from. The last-minute plans, and then also there seem to be a higher percentage of last-minute changes. So this can be a problem. For example, there was the North Korean Freedom Week a few weeks ago, and I know, I don't know if the person's here tonight, but one of the people who's coming to the series, the lectures, she, I guess, tried to go to one of the events listed, and then it apparently had been changed or something. And so, and I think I heard a few people actually were in that boat. And that's happened to me. It didn't happen to me for that particular event, but I didn't try and go to that particular event. But in the past, there have been events where I've gone to and there was nobody there, and obviously the plan had changed, but I didn't know. So these are some of the hurdles. There are also I think these are just after you've been here a while, we can sort of get used to that. But there are also other differences. One of the ones that I find that I'm struggling with currently is more just sort of, I have an expectation from my background. My expectation is I want to partner with organizations or individuals, I'm having a hard time getting my mind around it. But I think just in Korean society, it's more of a you have your sunbaes and your hubaes. You have your seniors and your juniors, but you don't have so many people that are at the exact same level as you. Your chingus, your friends, and that can be an issue. We need to build trust, but it's hard to do that if the person I'm working with looks way up to me or way down to me, at least from my perspective. So that's an issue too. So there are obviously some barriers, and I think some of you have encountered that. But the reason I'm saying all this explicitly is just, one of the themes of my message is just simply just stick with it, and be a little bit more proactive than you might otherwise be if for whatever reason you're expecting somebody to call you. You signed up for at an organization at their event. You signed your name on a list and you never hear from them. Well, you call them then. Don't let that discourage you and think, oh, okay, well, they don't want my interest, or they don't want my help, rather. You just keep following up with them, build that relationship, and in time, then you'll be in the loop. So let me talk a little bit about North Korean human rights organizations here in South Korea, specifically in Seoul. But I'm not really going to name them so much as just I want to categorize them. I would say that in general, they're very, not very, but they're getting bigger. But in general, they're small, they're underfunded, and they're underpaid. And there are some now that are getting bigger. I think Open Radio has I don't know, I've heard they have 15 or 20 people over there. But the problem is, they're probably, I have no idea what they get paid, but I would be willing to bet a lot of money they get paid very little, even at the top levels of the organization. So, I don't know how they operate, but I would be shocked if it weren't true. And so this is why sometimes, maybe you send an email to somebody or call somebody, they may, they're understaffed, that's part of the reason. It's not just a cultural thing, they're undermanned oftentimes. So, and just to drive home this point, my first job, Jingo mentioned in my introduction, that my first job out of college, I worked in the greater DC area, and I ran a seminar, and the purpose of the seminar was to help college students start independent newspapers at their college campuses. So anyway, when I first started there, I made a very small wage, but it was temporary, and it was the organization was nice. They actually, even though they started you off very low, if you worked hard, they brought you up pretty quickly. But anyway, when I think back to that first wage that I made 15 years ago, right out of college, and then think to I don't work full time at NKnet. I'm there 3 days a week. But if I extrapolated my salary up to, if I were working there full time, I think not even just forget about inflation. I think I make, or I would be making, somewhere between a third and a half of what I made 15 years ago in DC in my first job. And I think my understanding is we pretty much pay everybody the same. It's not that we it's not a, like if I'm there 5 years from now, I think I'll probably be making about the same amount. But anyway, so I just want to say that, give you the sense, I mean, this is a topic that I think nobody really wants to talk about, but just FYI, this is the situation. So really understaffed, underpaid, and so that, anyway, let me continue. Why is this? Okay, why is this? I don't know all the reasons, but I'm sure there's specific reasons I'm not going to mention, but I do know, for whatever reason, that it's been traditionally very hard to raise money in Korean society based on donations. Coming from the States, there's a big culture of giving, I would say. It's not as big here. Now, I will say that it seems to be getting bigger here. I know, like, when I look at the Citizens Alliance newsletter, I'm happy to see that they get, I don't remember, I haven't looked like this one, but I want to say it's several million won per month based on many small donations from donors.
But still it's 300 people, 300 people, and it's like 14 more than 14.
Right. So I don't know if you heard what Joanna said, but they have, their pool of people is 300 to 400 people, she said, out of the population of 48, 50 million South Koreans. So, but nonetheless, that in this, I don't know if you want to call it an industry, but that's a success story. Relative to, I know our group, we do that also where we have monthly donations. I don't know what the figures are, but I know they're much lower than that. Anyway, but this culture of monthly giving is starting to catch on here. And I've heard there are lots of college students who I think do give now monthly. But you can see when you go, you're by the universities or in the subways, you can see now Save the Children, UNHCR, Amnesty International, all these groups, we see them probably almost every day. But when I was first here, I didn't see that. But a few years ago that started, and so that giving culture is starting to catch on. And so I think this is starting to change, and it's exciting to me. But in the meantime, how do these groups even exist? It's mostly funding from overseas, the U.S., the National Endowment for Democracy, and some of its sister organizations, such as IRI, that's sponsoring this program. They provide a lot of the funding. I know in Europe is doing some, like Reporters Without Borders, I think gives to some of the radio stations. I know the EU has just started a program with PS Corps and several other groups. I'm not sure which groups exactly, but so it's starting to pick up. And I will say I have to give credit to the South Korean government a little bit. They, for example, the film festival that we did last year, they were the sponsor for that. So on a project basis, the South Korean government also sometimes is sponsoring things, but it's much, generally relative to the overseas governments, it's much lower. Okay, so that's sort of North Korean human rights organizations. I want to just say a couple of things about how do you hear about events, because that was one of the most frustrating things for me for years when I was first here, was, oh, there was an event yesterday, I didn't even know about it, and I would have loved to go to that, and I thought that they knew that I would be interested, but they didn't let me know. But anyway, it's somewhat of a cultural difference. I think also the other thing is, I'm expecting things oftentimes in English, even though now I'm getting better with my Korean, but still, maybe at that time, and even now, to some extent, I'm just, I think in English. And so, but what you have to do is, if you can, go to the Korean website. Excuse me. That will be updated much more frequently, of course. And there's another concept that I had no idea about, I think until actually I started working. Yeah, I think it was about the time I started working here. So within the last year and a half, I discovered that the way South Koreans promote their events, one of the ways is on every Korean website, there's like a Jayu Geishipan, like a board, and that anybody can post to. And that's why like they're taken over by spam oftentimes. But anyway, if you go to that, often you'll find out. So when you go to one organization's website, go to their Jayu Geishipan and see what other organizations have posted there. So that's how they spread the word about their seminars and their conferences this way oftentimes. I think maybe even we do this, I'm not sure, but because I don't promote the events in Korean, but I just do it on our own site, but I do the English site only. But so check that out. It's a small tip, but okay. So, but yeah, in general, I would like to encourage you to just keep following up with them. Try and get on their email lists. Sometimes it'll work. When you sign up for email lists, just keep and build personal relationships. That's the most important thing. So if for example, if you're able to tonight afterwards, please come to our we're going to head down to Sinchon and get something to eat and drink. Please come to that. I mean, that's how you can form a relationship with NKnet. Also, I don't know if Joanna is going to be able to join us or not afterwards, but if she's there, you can talk to her. There's actually a member, so Kill's in the back. He's with Link. I don't know if he wants me to tell that to you, but anyway, there are. He's not hiding. He's giving a thumbs up. So anyway, there are lots of people to network with here, but definitely, this is how things get done in Korea. Is these after parties, the things that from our perspective are sort of spontaneous or whatever. They're not really actually very spontaneous. It's sort of assumed that after an event, people will go out and get to know each other more. Okay. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the long run. So for the one or two of you out there who may be contemplating doing this for more than, excuse me a second, for getting involved with this for more than just a short time. Maybe you're still in college or something, or you're in grad school, or considering grad school. Some things to think about. First of all, even if you're not going to be in it for long run, I encourage everybody. And this is not telling you anything you don't know, but learn Korean as fast as you can. Work on it now. Keep working on it. That is only going to open doors for you. I can't stress it enough. But I think you already realize that living here, so I'm not going to blabber on about it. But there's lots of content out there now that's free. Sogong has on their website, I think it's korean.sogong.ac.kr. I have to check that, but they have a wonderful, free, huge program online. There's a new site, or relatively new, talktomeinkorean.com. You go, for intermediate speakers, you go to the Iyagi section, and that you have the transcript, you have the MP3 file, you can download it all for free. There's lots of material out there, so if you don't even, when you go, if you're not in Korea, that's not an excuse anymore. All right. Of course, in Korean society, education, as you know, is valued very highly. So when I was, in college, I had no idea I would eventually someday wind up living in Korea. So I never, thought about what I majored in other than what was interesting to me. But when I want to tell you a little bit about how I ended up getting my work visa here, because for those of you who might want to get a job at an NGO here working in South Korea, it might save you a year of headache and frustration that I went through. Basically, what you major in and your work experience in your home country is very important to getting a work visa here. So I basically, for about a year, I thought, okay, well, there's nothing I can do, because when I went to the immigration office and I said, okay, I want to get a job at an NGO, and they said, well, first they said, okay, well, you need to get your job off and then come back here. And I was like, no, you don't understand. The groups that I'm going to be applying to, they've never done this before. They have no idea what is going to be involved. So they're just going to put it back on me. So please tell me so I can tell them. So they're finally, okay, so they said, okay, what did you major in? Psychology. How much work experience do you have in this field in your home country? Well, not really any. Okay, you're unqualified. So in like 30 seconds, after well, maybe 20 seconds after I finally convinced them to listen to my questions, or, to tell me, then it was all over. It was like, oh, you're not qualified. So the way I actually, as you now know, the way I got hired was because they hired me as the webmaster, and I did work for 6 years in the States as a web developer. So, but I never, actually during that year, the reason it was such a frustration was because I never thought that these groups, again, are small, they're underfunded, and an English website would be, not maybe the first priority of any organization, right? So I never actually went to the groups and said, hey, you need an English webmaster? Because I could build a website for Koreans, but, Koreans aren't actually interested in looking at it, but that's another story. We may come back to that later, maybe. But so anyway, after 30 seconds in the immigration office, my plan was dashed. But anyway, the long story short, I did get the job because NKnet did actually offer me a job as their webmaster, which I needed 5 years of work experience. If I had not studied computer science in school, then I needed 5 years of work experience. Let's say if I had, it's been a while now since I thought about these numbers, but I think it was something like if I had an undergraduate degree in it, I only needed like 1 year of work experience then in my home country, or maybe it was 2 years. And then if I had a graduate degree in a related field, then maybe only 1 year or no actual work experience. But so the amount of what you study needs to be directly apply to the field you'll be working in, and the amount of work experience, and they sort of go together. You can't just look at one; you have to look at both together. So that's one thing I want to tell you about But then there is a bit of hope because I just happen to have the right work experience, right? But I didn't really even plan that. But there are other ways too, and there's a new relatively new system. Some of you may have heard of it. I know actually at least one of you in the audience I've told about. But there's a new version of the new subcategory of the F2 visa, which if I understand correctly, F2 is normally for people who marry Koreans. Well, F27 is a new category. It's based on points. And there are 120 total points, at least at the current system. And if you get 80 or more points, and there are different ways to reach those points, or reach that point level, then you qualify for the visa, and then that once you have an F visa, it's like a residence visa. Then so right now, or before I had, when NKnet first hired me, I had a work visa, and it was it's good for a year. You have to renew it every year. It's good for that employer only. If you change employers, it has limitations. But the F visa, it's a residence visa. It's good for like 3 years, and you can work at this job and this job at the same time, and you just basically apply for a job as if you were a Korean. You pay taxes, the same. So the goal, I want to encourage you, think about this F visa and how you might qualify for that. Go to the immigration office, get the system. I think maybe it's on the website, but it's hard to find. But get the point system. Just go to the immigration officer and say, I heard about this point system. Can you show me they'll print you out the page, and you can go home and calculate how you might be able to get the points. And it's tough, but the longer you're here and the more Korean you learn, the easier it is to qualify for it. So the things they look at are like age. I think if you're single, you get more points. If you're in they look at age like this. So if you're a little bit too young, I don't remember exactly, but maybe like early 20s, mid 20s, you're not quite at the peak. And I think if it's somewhere around in the early to mid 30s, maybe early 30s, you're at you get the most number of points. And then after that, you're getting old in Korean society. But anyway, so it's kind of like that. You get points, and I think for age you get I don't remember what I got, but 23 points or something like that. But so that's a lot of points out of 80, right? Then what else? You get points for education. You get points for your work experience back home. You get points, did I say this already? Korean language. Like, so if you get on the TOPIK test, the test of proficiency in Korean, if you get a low score, a 1 or a 2, I think you get 10 points, which is that's a lot of points. And then 15, or if you get a 3 or a 4, I mean intermediate score, you get 15 points. And then a high, advanced 5 or 6, you get 20 points. What else? Volunteer experience. So I had volunteered for this group called Justice for North Korea for over 2 years. So the maximum is you can get is for 2 years. So I think I got 5 points out of that. Interestingly, I got 1 point for having graduated from the Korean language program. But then I thought about it and I realized, okay, well that makes sense because, I mean, it's actually lucky I got 1 point because, it's all really based on, the test score. So, but anyway, so look into that. And the other qualification is you need, I mean, all of this, of course, is subject to change. It maybe even has changed already, I don't know. But one other requirement is that you have to have like an E2 or an E7. There may be other categories, but those are like the main ones. You already have to have that for 1 year. So I couldn't, even if I had all my points ready, I couldn't have applied for it until after I'd renewed the first year of, because I used to have an E7. So, but that's pretty much how it works, and it's not easy. But if you get a degree in South Korea, not like from a language program, but like an undergraduate or a graduate degree in South Korea, you get big points for that. If you have like a master's in something, you get a few points extra for that over what you would get for having a bachelor's degree. But that will help you if you just want to get a regular work visa. That master's degree will help you greatly. And I think it's easier to sort of bend, like, okay, well, when you explain to them how this is related to your, I think they may be a little bit, this is my sense, don't quote me on this, but my sense is that they're a little bit more lenient if you have a master's degree, if you're trying to apply for a work visa. But okay, so that's a bit about education and visas. One last thought about school, and that is like what to study. Obviously, there are obvious fields, political science, law, things like this. One thing that maybe I did not think of this, and I feel like I learned about this, or it dawned on me late in the game, and that was social work. If you want to work with refugees, this is a really good major. If you want to get a job, I should say, working with North Korean refugees. And of course, actually, to be honest, if you work here, maybe Korean social workers may have a huge jump in the line ahead of you. So, but there are North Korean refugees who have settled in many, like dozens of countries around the world. I think it's a couple dozen. And so, if you want to get a job helping North Korean refugees settle in your country, then of course, study your Korean. But social work is a great thing to study. I think it was Mike King's book that opened my eyes to this. I read that a few years ago. Okay. Now I'm going to go through what I told a few of you is my, quote, laundry list of ways that you can get involved. Some of these are bigger or smaller, but here we go. So that, a minute ago, that was sort of the long-run advice. Now this is more, what can you do now? And we'll start with mostly topics that you can do from anywhere, whether you're here in South Korea or when you go home, or if you're already there. Okay, a couple that jump out at me that I like very much. That I would, if I had a PowerPoint, the top of the screen would say messages of hope. You can send, for example, you can send a letter to be broadcast into North Korea over, we talked about, last week Chris talked about shortwave radio. One of the stations is I think it's Free North Korea Radio, is partnering with the North Korea Freedom Coalition in DC, and And you basically go to their website. It's nkfreedom.org, and click on, I think it's, if I remember right, it's click on Get Involved, and then they have different things, but I think the top one is, how to send a letter to North Koreans. I think you write it in English. If I understand correctly, they'll translate it for you and then broadcast it. I assume they're still doing it. It's still on their website. Similarly, link, and I wonder, I didn't double check and make sure you're still doing this, but it is on their website as of today. If you go to the bottom of their website, linkglobal.org, click on FAQ, and then find the question, can I write a letter to a refugee in your shelters? And the answer is yes. And so you can, and it says, if I remember right, it said specifically their shelters in China. So you can write messages of hope. And, if you think about it, if you're a refugee in a shelter in China, that's probably not a very exciting time of your life. So, getting a letter like that actually might, I would give that a go. I think that's an awesome idea. Okay, next category. If there's a PowerPoint, it would say, petition governments for change. And this is a broad category. I'm just going to talk about it briefly, but we could talk a lot about this. I'm not a lawyer though, but one thing you can do, and I know we have a few embassy representatives here tonight, but definitely is to make sure that your government's policies and the policies that have been given to the embassies are friendly and beneficial, helpful, and will protect any refugees who show up on their doorstep in any country in Asia. Because sometimes this happens, and usually they will, refugees will, maybe there was a case in 2009 where some refugees. This was something that actually, do you remember the week 4, Kim Sang-hun? He was one of the men doing this. There's a wonderful article in the LA Times about his role and 2 other activists, their roles, about this mission. But basically they helped a group of 9 refugees into the Danish embassy in the capital of Vietnam, I think. I think it was in Hanoi. But the issue is, what will the staff, the desk person, the person at the gate, what will they do? They need to be aware that somebody like this might show up. I think by now that secret may be out. I think, maybe, but the point is we need to make sure that each government has good policies. And certainly we need to make sure that the South Korean government has good policies. I think Kim Sang-hun, I think, may have talked about that some in week 4. But to the extent, so writing a letter to your representatives of your country and saying, hey, this is important to me, and you please check on this. For those of you who are from democratic countries where your representatives listen to you, please, put that to use. And if you go to the, I already mentioned the North Korea Freedom Coalition's website. And I think also, oh no, actually, wait, I couldn't figure out how to get there. I just already had a direct link, but so I'm going to hand this out later. This is a list of organizations, not a complete list by any means, but a list of organizations where you can get involved. But at the very bottom, there's a link. A long link, but anyway, under the title of Letter Writing Campaign, Writing to Chinese Officials. And this is specifically about China and saying, please do not repatriate North Korean refugees. Do not send them back to North Korea where they're systematically punished, tortured, and sometimes worse. But they have a letter there for you. They have addresses of Chinese government offices, embassies, and it's all ready for you. You just have to, send off an email or a fax or a letter. Okay. Now, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but one of the things that I personally think is the biggest need in the greater North Korean human rights movement is just simply funds. And a lot of you are students or young people. You may not have a lot of money, but the thing is, like in this room, I don't know exactly how many there are, but I think there are probably over 50 of you. And if we were to pool our resources and not buy maybe 2 or 3 cups of coffee a month and give that money, Casey's chuckling, and give that money to, and you can choose the organization, but choose an organization and give it to them. And then if you give it every month, 10,000 won a month, $10 a month, that over the course of the year from one person adds up, and then to the extent that everybody gets involved, it's a really big difference. And maybe Johanna's group, instead of having 300 or 400 monthly donors, maybe they have 500 or 600. That's a big boost. It enables them to do more. But I actually, this thought went through my mind before I moved here, and that was, at the time I was a web developer. I had a decent job, and I thought, well, and at the time I was able, wasn't able to donate a lot, but I was able to donate to groups that I wanted to support, and I did that. But I was like, well, I'm giving up this steady stream of money. But at the time, I was, back in the States, and I knew of a few good groups in the States, but I didn't really know by any means up close. Well, if I wanted to give money to somebody in Seoul who's theoretically closer to the problem, I wouldn't know who to give it to, right? So, but the irony was I was quitting that money stream in order to come here and find out who to be able to donate to. That wasn't the only reason by any means I moved here, but the thought went through my mind, well, if I'm really serious about helping this movement, if you will, maybe my role, what I can contribute, is actually best, or the thing I can do the best is simply earn money and give it to somebody who knows what they're doing more than I know. So I want to put that thought in your mind, sorry. And in South Korea, there's an interesting system called CMS, and there are monthly donation systems in the U.S. I think they mostly sprung up since I left. But I think you probably just give your credit card, say how much you want to give, or maybe your bank account number. Here it works. You just give your bank account number, you give your alien registration number or your citizen ID number, or whatever, and you're basically you give it to the organization on a form. And that gives you permission, and then they, whatever date you say, it's the 1st of the month, 15th of the month, whatever, and whatever amount you say, 5,000 won, 10,000 won, 100,000 won, they'll pull that out automatically then. They have permission to do that from your bank account. And so that is something I want you guys to think about, and that is a way that, and don't feel bad if it's only 10,000 a month. That's just I would be very happy, if you guys, thought that was a lot, because that is a meaningful amount. Okay, so other things. Okay, for those of you here who teach in the public schools or international schools, I don't know. I think it would be harder in Hagwon, but. There are some things you can do. First of all, I think public school teachers probably have more freedom about what you can talk about. A little bit, at least. I don't know. On certain days, I've heard that it's more free as to what you can talk about. But anyway, one of my main points tonight also is going to be, just simply talking about this to other people gets them interested, or at least has the opportunity. If you don't do that, they're not going to do it. But in the classroom, you can do this too. So, you know, and you don't have to do it in big ways, but just in small ways, if you mention things, students may, you know, see that and ask you about that later. But anyway, incorporate this into your classroom. Another thing is, if anybody out there maybe has a major in education, or you know, has an interest in curriculum development, that kind of a thing, and would like to develop material, maybe say teaching English, that you know you have to talk about something in English, so you might as well talk about North Korean human rights if you're me. But I may be biased, but anyway, you know, I would love if anyone wants to develop some, you know, curriculum, or you know, you have worksheets, you have, you know, whatever, you know, lesson plans involving working this in, where it's really sort of you're just kind of working it in. It doesn't have to be the main point. Then, you know, please, you know, if you're willing to share, I would love to upload that to our website for everyone else. Other things you can do, like my understanding in South Korea, the middle school students, I think they're required to join a club or something like this. Is it? I see one person shaking their head, so or nodding. And so if you have an interest in maybe you can find a Korean teacher to team with you, but anyway, if you're brave, you can be the advisor to the North Korean Interest Club, or you know, whatever you want to, you know. I think there's Alan. There's a club at your school. Is that?
Yeah, he's in charge.
Okay. We have a student here. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for coming. You know, here, this student here is in a club at I think he's at an international school here, but you know, all the schools have clubs. Why not have a club related to this topic? And I think some of them, if not many of them, now do. Okay. And if you're attending school, let's say you're a university student or a graduate student here, or back anywhere in the world, you can speaking event at your school, or you can organize a documentary screening, things like this. You can put it together with a fundraiser if you want. You don't have to, but it can be awareness. It can be awareness and fundraising. They're all different combinations. Brita out there, she did one at Korea University late last year, or was it early this year? It was not long ago. Yeah, it was early this year. And NKnet would be happy to help you. You're going to have to do most of the legwork, but we would be happy to point you in the right direction, maybe help you, hook you up with a documentary, give you tips. Anyway, these are some ideas. Okay, I think we've got to hurry up here. If you're not in South Korea, first of all, one of the things you can do is host an exhibition about North Korean human rights. We at NKnet, we had one last year, but it was all in Korean. The new one that I think is going to debut, we're going to host in a gallery in Insadong in June. We're having a North Korean human rights exhibition in a gallery in June in Insadong. And but I've been told that the materials for that will be in 4 languages, not only Korean but also English, Chinese, and Japanese. So, and obviously there are a lot of foreign visitors go to Insadong. I think it's the #1 tourist destination in South Korea. So, anyway, after that, one of the things that you guys can do is perhaps we'll have to work out the terms of that and everything, but maybe you can borrow that, here if you're in the Seoul area, or borrow part of it, and you guys maybe might be interested in that at your school. Hosting North Korean human rights exhibitions. But interestingly, even if you're outside of Korea, there's a group called Sage Korea. I think the URL, this URL is correct, but I'm not sure if this is the right place to download it. Or maybe you go there, get the user ID. But anyway, sagekorea.com, S-A-G-E Korea.com, they had a very successful exhibition about the North Korean political prison camp system. About, I think it was in early 2011, it was in Sinchon, and it drew like thousands and thousands of people. It was really amazing. But they uploaded the high-resolution images for the posters, or whatever you want to call them, like 50 million bytes files each. They uploaded them and then made the password to this account, the download account, open to everybody. And so if you want to, you have to print them out, you have to, take them to a printer, but you can host your own exhibition anywhere. All right, real quick, we're going to have to move on, we're running out of time. But now I'm going to shift more gears into what we can do specifically in South Korea that you can't really do elsewhere. One thing that you may have noticed is that we foreigners get attention in South Korea. And so we can use that. If you show up at an event, now if you're Korean American or Korean Canadian, maybe it doesn't help as much, unfortunately. But it is sad. But for the other folks, okay, this is a copy of the largest daily, newspaper daily in South Korea, the Chosun Ilbo, from the front page, top of the front page, April 18th. And this woman is she is, I didn't know who she was, but she is a singer in the group Boney M, which was popular in the 70s, I believe, a disco group. And there is a song that when you hear the jingle, you will recognize it. Anyway, this woman, she, and I'm not sure if she was the only member of the group, but she came, and I think maybe she even performed at one of the gatherings that has been going on daily across from the Chinese embassy here in Seoul. And I have no idea how many people were at this event. But think about it, though. If there were even only 5 people at this event, it doesn't matter, because look at the picture. It's on the top of the front page. And the question is, what determines what goes into the newspaper and where? It's all relative to the other news of the day. It's all relative to what is the new photo editor thinks will be interesting. And a foreigner in South Korea doing something is more interesting than a South Korean person doing the exact same thing. So, not maybe 100% of the time, but in many cases. And okay, so that was about a month ago, and this was like a week later, during North Korea Freedom Week. I thought ahead to save the Chosun Ilbo. Here again, the Chosun Ilbo, same photo placement. That is Suzanne Schulte, the head of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, and she was at an event where this woman, if I remember right, her husband was abducted during the Korean War, or shortly thereafter, and the event was they were reading the names of the hundreds and I think thousands of people who have been abducted over the years, and especially during the Korean War, there were tens of thousands then, and this this is obviously in its own right, it's a powerful photo. It's not just because there's a foreigner on the page. In the picture, but nonetheless, I think that was probably part of the reason that that photo was put where it was. It may, if it might have made it, in page 10 or something if there hadn't been a foreigner in the picture. I'm not sure, but anyway. So all I'm saying is encouraging you to come out to events, and even if the event isn't big, if there is a reporter there, they're going to be more likely to take your picture, and it's going to get higher placement in the paper, or get on the internet. And also, they're more likely to interview you. They're curious. Why is a foreigner at this event? They're curious. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, in the laundry list, some things you can do. There's a group now that I think once a month, they get up on Saturday morning. They leave from Itaewon, they board a bus, and they go, somebody's nodding head up there, maybe has participated. But they launch balloons to North Korea, but they don't put leaflets, or maybe they put, I think they have a small explanation, but basically they're sending socks. It's not a very political thing, but it's something that, especially during the winter, is a very valuable thing, very practical thing for the people of South Korea. And there are many groups that send many different things to North Korea by balloon. This is just one of the things that you can do. Okay, there's English tutoring. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. The other thing I want to say real quick is prepare now for when you go back to your home country. Because if you're not going to be here the rest of your life, which is probably most of you who are, of the foreigners in the room, most of you are probably going to be leaving at some point. So think about when you go back to your country, if you choose to get involved with this back home, they're going to be, how you spend your time now will determine how you can be effective back home. One thing is, in one way, and that is like getting to know the groups here. So networking, you come out tonight, you can network with us and some of the groups represented here tonight. But meeting as many people and getting a good sense of what they do, who they are, how they spend their money, what their motivations are, that will really help you later. Because if you go home and you want to do a fundraiser, but then you're like, oh, well, who do I want to give the money to? Well, if you have a personal connection and you have a personal trust in what they're doing, you're gonna be able to. It's gonna work much better. You'll be much more credible when you're raising money. It all works much better. So get to know the groups here, and also as you get to know the groups, you're gonna learn more. About doing awareness too back home. Okay, so that's sort of a brief laundry list of some of the little things you can do here and there. Some of the bigger things. Now, real quick, I want to talk a little bit about how you can volunteer specifically with NKnet, and then after that, we're going to talk briefly about our activities after the speaker series concludes tonight. Okay, and these first things you can volunteer with NKnet actually from anywhere, and some of these things you can also do for the other groups too, not just us. As you might already know, probably the number one pressing need for our group and many of the groups is translation. So it's not something that we can all do, but the few of you who can do it, it's really needed. So we have a monthly magazine. It's all in Korean. My goal is really not to get it all translated every month, but there are several articles that I would love to translate. The Daily NK has wonderful content every day, but it's news, and it's generally shorter items. Our magazine, it's more features. Of the ones that I want to translate, it's more features, stories about defectors, stories about their adjustment here, success stories. These are the things that are more length, that I want to get into English. Other things, transcribing. Occasionally, Jingo, he will interview quote-unquote experts or whomever, and he will interview them in English. So for that, you don't actually need to know Korean. You just have to be very patient and hit rewind, many, many times, and pause many times on, on your audio player, and then make a transcript of the interview. It's a very thankless task, but seriously, I will be very grateful if you do that. We don't have it all the time, but sometimes we do have need for that. And then editing, occasionally we have need for that. And other groups have a lot more need for that. On week 4, Kim Sang-hung, his group, NKDB, the database center, they publish, long, lengthy reports, many in English, and many of those then get into, many in Korean, and then of those, some get into English, and they're several hundred pages, many of them. So they need editing, and that often is a time-consuming process because it may be the person who translated it. They're not a professional translator, so you may have to rewrite a lot of it. You're going to have to make lots of questions to go back to them and say, "Did you mean this or that?" But anyway, that's needed a lot.